there is this attack on excellence right now in our culture, where if you dare to be a group that achieves, if you dare to be a group that studies hard, that performs, Asian Americans study twice as many hours as the average American in the United States, there will be, unfortunately, political consequences for you, such as in the Ivy Leagues, where they don't want too many Asians in the Ivy Leagues. And Harvard even says that if they didn't discriminate against Asian Americans would make up about 43% of the Ivy Leagues, but instead they make up about 20%. So when you become a group that really achieves, you inspire resentment. And Asian Americans really are the canary in the coal mine here. If Harvard's philosophy of discriminating against certain races was allowed to propagate into our country as it has, then what's going to happen is that there will be discrimination across the board. And this is what you're now seeing. You're seeing diversity and inclusion saying we need more people of a certain race in corporate board positions, or we need more people of a certain race in government positions. And you see this larger attack in our country, and if it's allowed to spread, Asian Americans are going to be the first group, the first minority to go, whose excellence is going to be penalized across the board. So I felt that I had to write this book, An Inconvenient Minority, to show the damages and the longer term consequences of attacking excellence in our country. Because this larger principle of meritocracy applies to everybody. This idea of you should be treated on the content of your character, not the color of your skin.
Well, no, and that's quite interesting as well. You've, around the same time as you're publishing this book, you've also become deeply involved in a new group that I think you're the president of, Color Us United.
Yes, and Color Us United, what we seek to do is we advocate for a race-blind America. And that is an America where no matter what your race is, you can be treated on the basis of your own individual merits, not on the basis of the color of your skin. We have this division, so much racial division in our country. But where does it come from? Because only 29% of Americans even think that their race is important to them at all. And people certainly do not want to be treated on something that they cannot control about themselves. I was born in this skin. I can't change, I can't control this aspect about myself. Same thing with you, Jan. Same thing with, everybody in this country. Why should we let that be a factor in the way that controls us, and why should we let that divide us? Color Us United, colorusunited.org. We are trying to promote that principle of colorblindness to the rest of society.
You dedicate a whole chapter in your book to talking about the realities at Harvard. You mentioned that there's, sort of this active discrimination. I want to get you to talk a little bit more about that and where things stand with that, because of course it's being contested. But a lot of these ideas actually originally come from Harvard as well.
So we have this racial ideology today at Harvard University that stems not only from the white progressive racial guilt that infects Harvard's university system, but it also stemmed from Harvard's uniquely elite managerial mindset. Harvard, at the same time that Harvard was developing critical race theory, Derek Bell was the founder of critical legal studies. He was a Harvard professor. Harvard law alumni became the progenitors of critical race theory following Derek Bell. While Harvard was developing critical race theory, Harvard Business School, over on the other end, was at the zeitgeist of managerialism. And managerialism teaches that it is easier to manage groups than it is to manage individuals. So how do you get people to buy your stuff? Or how do you get people to vote for the politician that you want? You subdivide people into groups, and you treat people as blocks, and you convince those people that they become part of a group. And that is the essence of managerialism. And so critical race theory is really this marriage of racial division and managerialism, because it subdivides people into groups, and then it tells people, okay, based on your group status, this is what you must do. You must act privileged or you must act oppressed.
Something you mentioned, which I think is quite interesting, is you mentioned something about elite white guilt, and you mentioned it as if it was something that everybody understands. I think there's a lot of people that might not understand, and frankly, I'm not even sure I fully understand.
So white progressives are the least likely race, or are the least likely group of people to hold a positive assessment of their own race. Every other race in America has a more positive assessment of their own race than they do of other races. Blacks have more positive assessments, much more positive assessments of blacks than they do of other races. So do Asians, although a lesser extent. But white progressives are the only group that has a lower assessment of their own race than of other races. There's this idea infused within progressivism of white guilt, of this idea that, you are infused with a kind of white privilege and you need to give it away. So you have these elite white progressives at Harvard who are privileged by all extended means. Harvard is a very privileged place to go to. It has a $40 billion endowment. And you have these progressives at Harvard who feel guilty about that. And how do they solve feeling guilty about their own privilege? Well, they do it through the admissions system. They say, well, what is going to make me feel like I'm doing a good thing in society? They look at people of other race and they say, we need to admit more marginalized peoples. And to them, it means black people. And to them, it means Hispanic people. So they manipulate the admissions system to admit more black and Hispanic people who are actually less qualified than the people that they have to reject in order to get that racial balancing.
What you found, or what the data actually show, and what you mentioned earlier, is that the Asian Americans are disproportionately discriminated against here.
What happens is, if you want to admit a lower qualified person of a certain race, you have to cut out somebody, right? So who are the people that are cut out? Well, they happen to be Asian Americans, because there are too many of Asian Americans at this school, as perceived by the progressive elite. And so what happens is that you have Asian Americans, they have to score 440 points higher to have the same chance of admission as a black student. An Asian American in the top academic decile of academic achievement has a lower chance of admission than a black American at the 4th lowest academic decile, and even a white American in the 8th lowest academic decile. So in order to, of course, help one minority, so to speak, you have to exclude another minority. And this is why Asian Americans are the inconvenient minority.
So we're often told that it's the whites that are the oppressors. So you might expect that those would be the group that would be the most discriminated against in this model, but you're saying that's not what's happening?
In this model, in Harvard's model, Asians are the most discriminated against. And I think what this represents is not only the elevation of black Americans as the most marginalized group, but it is this larger racial hierarchy of oppression that critical race theorists are proposing, where black people are the most oppressed, followed by Latino people, and then I would argue followed by white people, and then even Asian people at the bottom, because Asian people right now are the racial group in America that has the highest household income, highest academic achievement, and everything like that. So if you want to make a policy based on equity, you have to delete, Asian Americans first in order to get to the ratios that you want to get. So what happens is they claim to be attacking white supremacy, but really they're attacking meritocracy. Really, they're attacking colorblindness. And so Asian Americans, who disproportionately believe in meritocracy, who come, often poor, often without wealth or social connections or privilege, they come here with a simple belief that if you work hard in this country, you can achieve and you can be successful. And they have been successful because of that belief. But now that belief is under attack and it's being called systemically racist.